Hey there, welcome to the first tutorial video for Under the Lens. Today I'm going to be looking at creating multi-camera sequences and going as in-depth as I can to make sure that you understand all of the processes involved. I do want to create more of these tutorial videos, so do leave any suggestions in the comments below, and I'll make sure I create a playlist on the channel to compile all of the tutorial videos that I do, so make sure to check that out as well. So without further ado, please enjoy the video. So I'm using Adobe Premiere Pro 2019. Obviously I'm editing it on Windows 10. It's not too different to Mac apart from a few shortcuts here and there. But yeah, otherwise it's more or less the same. A lot of the previous versions of Adobe are also very similar in the way they function in this regard. I'm editing within the Editing Workspace, which you can find if you just head up to Window, Workspaces, and then select Editing. That just means we're all looking at the exact same thing, but obviously if you know your way around Premiere already, you shouldn't need to do that. I'm assuming most of you have a general sort of a basic knowledge of Premiere as well, just so I won't go through every single detail, but I will explain in depth, obviously, what we're doing with the multi-camera sequences. So, first of all, why would you want to use a multi-camera sequence? Well, the answer is it's the most efficient way to edit anything that's shot with multiple cameras, funnily enough. Obviously, you can manually synchronize things in here and chop and change things yourself if you really want to. But it's really not that efficient. You can see here we've got footage from the C300 and the 5D. Very different cameras, they process footage in different ways, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend using them both together in a multi-camera shoot. But that's what we're working with here today. They can still be synchronized. This is all from one take. It's just the 5D splits long takes into multiple files. So basically the beginning of this is the same as this, and the end of this is the same as the end of this. So what we'll do is we'll drag them both in the timeline, just so I can give you an example of the manual way that you might put some multi-camera footage together. So you can see we've got it all in here. This is Steve at Teach Music Online. Check those guys out on YouTube. Some great stuff coming from them very soon. We can synchronize these just by eye if we wanted to. I've done a little clap at the front here. Guitar 5, take 1. Obviously just a very crude way to synchronize things. Basically just a safety net in case the auto synchronization tool that Premiere has doesn't quite work and I need to manually sync it up frame by frame. It's always good to have some kind of visual hard clap, even if it's just your hands as I have there, because we didn't have a clapperboard handy on set. But yeah, so you can select these two clips, right click them, go over to synchronize. Obviously you want to select audio, we're synchronizing by the audio as the start and the end of the clips differ. Track channel 1, because track channel 2 of the C300 footage doesn't have any audio there, it's just going through the left channel, so there'll be no information there for it to process. So that's track channel 1. Click OK. This will take a second now to actually process what we're doing. You can expect this generally to take a minute or two. It depends how fast your computer is, how much footage there is, how many different clips you're trying to synchronize, but just bear with it and be patient. Okay, so that's done. So you can see now it's moved the clips, it's synchronized them, and we can see by where the clap is that it's synchronized it pretty closely together. You can tell it's slightly off. Obviously that's because this is less than the frame. If you really wanted to tighten it up yourself, what you could do is right click up here, go into show audio time units, and that basically gives you more control to move. You're not just moving frame by frame, you're literally moving by like tiny milliseconds. So you can zoom right in and then start moving things around and trying to synchronize things manually if you wanted to. Obviously turn that off so you can go back to going frame by frame with your keys. So now if we wanted to edit in this way, we could press C, get the cut tool, start cutting things out. Well, if we wanted it to go there, go through, so that's now going between the two cameras. And then we could do it again here and just keep going along like that. If we really wanted to do it that way, again, it's a bit clunky, it takes a little while to kind of find all the points that you might want to cut to. And then again, if you accidentally were to ripple delete or put something in later on, things can get moved around, nothing's really locked in place, it can get a little bit messy. So there is a more efficient way to do it, and that's what we're going to look at now. So if we delete this, we turn our attention to the bins over here. Now if we select these two clips again, what you want to do is you want to right click on the camera that you want to be camera 1, if you like, your main camera. This is important just for knowing which one is going to be labeled as camera 1 if that's an important thing to you. So we right click on the one that's camera 1, which is the C300, and then we go to create multi-camera source sequence. That's going to give you a bunch of options here. The way I've got it set up right now, in this current state, is kind of how I tend to always have it. It's only really workable though if you've got audio with your footage, otherwise you'd have to find some other way to synchronize it, which I'll go through in a second. But this has never really given me any trouble with what I've been doing. I've synchronized 2, 3, 4 cameras. It's always worked equally well. The drop down up here is basically saying what you want your multi-camera sequence to be when it gets put in the bins over here. Obviously video clip name basically means this video clip's name plus whatever you type in here. Same with audio clip, and then custom is just going to be whatever you type in here. So we'll type multicam example, which is very creative, I know. Okay, so the synchronize point, at the minute it's going to do exactly what we did before, audio track channel 1, so it will synchronize it in the same way that it did before using the track channel 1 audio from both those clips. If you wanted to, you could use the time code if you'd set that up on both the cameras correctly and on the shoot, or you could use the in and out points, which basically means you would go into here, double click them so it appears, and then say I wanted to find the frame where my hands clap together. I would find that on both of these clips, press I on the keyboard to select the in point, and then use those to synchronize. Again, that takes a bit more time, so if you've got the audio, this is the most automatic way to do it. Move source clips to process clips bin. I don't particularly like that. Basically all it does is it moves the clips that you've selected into a separate bin that it will generate called process clips. It doesn't really have any bearing on anything other than it's just basically told you which clips have been processed. If you need to keep record of that, then great. Otherwise, I find it just kind of disorganizes your layout. I've put these in folders that I want them to be in. I don't want them to be moved somewhere else, so I've unchecked it. Audio here, sequence settings camera 1, it's basically saying it's going to mute all the audio apart from camera 1's audio. So it will keep the audio there, it will mute camera 2's audio. You can change this in the sequence later on, so don't worry if you get this wrong, it's all changeable after you've processed it anyway. Camera names, I'll show you where this appears later. Enumerate cameras tends to be what I go for. Again, it doesn't make too much of a difference generally. Basically that means it's going to say this is camera 1, that's camera 2. If you have another one, obviously camera 3. If you said use track names, this would end up being video 1, video 2. It uses the video tracks here to distinguish the name. And then clip names, it takes the clips here. So that can be useful sometimes if you've named all your footage by each camera and you just want to quickly see which shot is being pulled from which camera. I'm just going to keep it as enumerate cameras. We're going to say okay. It's probably going to process it very quickly because we've already synchronized this footage using the audio as we did in the timeline just now. So don't expect it to be this quick. Normally, it will normally take a few seconds. Yeah, so that was nice and fast. And now we have our multicam example over here in our bins. You can see here the symbol that basically symbolizes that it is a multi-camera sequence. You won't really see that anywhere else. If we double click it, you'll see it appears up here like any other clip would. And you can drag it into your sequence like so, just like you would with any other clip or with a nest, and it kind of functions like a nest would. As you can see at the moment, we've only got one camera displaying here. We can't see multiple cameras. That's basically showing us what is being displayed within the multi-camera sequence at this time. We haven't made any cuts or any changes, so it's just showing camera 1. How do we know it's camera 1? Well, we've got MC1 there. And you can also see it over here. If we go into multi-camera, it's got camera 1 selected there. So if we'd said clip name or track name, that's where that would be different. Like I say, it doesn't matter hugely. If I click camera 2, I can manually change this now to camera 2. So you see that the whole sequence here changes. I'll change that back to camera 1. And again, it all changes back to camera 1. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how do I start making cuts? Well, if you go into your display here and you right click, you go down to display mode, and then it should by default be set to composite video. You want to select multi-camera. You can see now it's divided into 3 clips here. If we had a third camera, it would appear here. If we had a fourth camera, it would appear here. But basically what this is showing is this is camera 1, this is camera 2, and this is what is live in the timeline right now. This is what's live right there. This is showing you basically what's hidden out of the way. Now, if we play through, and I click, and then I click back. Now, if I press spacebar, you'll see, if I zoom in, it's made those cuts. Basically, whenever I've clicked on a separate thing, it has then cut to that camera at that point in the timeline that has been playing along. So you can basically make cuts live as you're going along just by clicking on the separate clips. Obviously it highlights which one you're on, it shows you which one's live in the timeline here, and then whenever you press spacebar, it saves those clicks as cuts in your timeline. Much faster than manually going in and cutting things, much harder for things to get knocked out of sync because it's all synced within a nest effectively. If you miss the cut, because sometimes obviously it can be hard to cut things at the right place whilst you're doing it live, you can just go in and you can make manual tweaks yourself using the old trim tool, like so. So if you wanted the cut to come in earlier, you could do that. Let's say you wanted a whole cut here, you cut to camera 1, but you wanted to cut to camera 2, you can just click on it, and if the multi-camera display is up still, you can click on that there, and you'll see it changes it. I'm not playing, so it changes it immediately. If I were playing it, it would then obviously only make the cut when I press spacebar. But if you hover over the clip and then just click there, you can change it like that. You just got to bear in mind that it changes the whole thing. It doesn't make a cut where the cursor is. For that to happen, you have to press spacebar, and then you can tweak things again if you want to, like so. So that's basically how the general functionality of it works. You might have to lower your quality of your playback down if you've got 4 cameras on the go and your computer can't quite handle it. As you can see, I've had to put mine down to half so that it can handle this. So just be aware that it can take some processing power to do this and cut things live, but if you can get it all the way down to 1/8, you should be okay. So like a nest, we can put different effects on here. You know, we could grade this if we wanted to. It will only grade what's within the cut, so what's highlighted there. So if I was to put an effect here, it would just put the effect on here, it wouldn't put it here. But it functions in the same way as a nest in the sense that any changes I make to this, if I was to grade this right now, it would also grade that first camera as well. So anything I change in here, for example, let's add black and white to this clip here. Now you can see this again just shows you what's live in the timeline, so that's why these haven't been affected. But if I go onto my second camera, that is also black and white because, as I say, it's like a nest. It will affect anything within that nested sequence there. So those have both been displayed as now as black and white. Obviously over here hasn't because there's a cut there. If I were to apply black and white here, it would do this whole section here. Something else to quickly note is that the first part here, whatever is before your first cut is what remains linked to the audio. All of this is separate. So just bear that in mind when you're trimming the first bit here, because it will also trim the end of your audio. And likewise, obviously, if you trim the start off, it will trim your audio. Whereas if I was to trim this, it has no bearing on the audio whatsoever. So just bear in mind that anything before your first cut is automatically linked to the audio beneath it. So any trimming that you make there, or if you move it around separate to everything else, it will affect it like that. So that's now basically knocked everything out of sync because this does not move with that now that it's been cut. It just overlaps it. So just be careful not to do that. You can see that the cameras don't really match in terms of their visual quality. Obviously this one's a little more contrasty, this one's a bit more flat in its color, a bit more desaturated. We kind of want them to look the same if it's going to be a smooth multi-camera sequence. Now if I wanted to, obviously I could go in, I could apply a grade here, I could apply a grade there, I could keep applying grades into each one individually, but there's a quicker way to do it, and that's basically we want to open up the multi-camera sequence itself, and this comes in handy for a variety of reasons. So if we go back to our bins over here, what you want to do is you want to right click. Unlike a nest, which you could just double click and open up into a sequence, with the multi-camera sequences you have to right click them and say open in timeline. And it opens it as a normal sequence. This is basically now acts as a normal sequence. As you can see, there's no cuts here. So all the cuts that we've made in here have just affected the nest of the multi-camera sequence, if you like. It's all still intact here as it was originally before we changed anything. It's all synced up. Basically, it's been synchronized again using the audio. It's muted the audio from camera 2 because we basically told it to prioritize camera 1's audio. If I unmuted that now and kept that unmuted as well, it would play audio in here from both cameras, which obviously sound a bit noisy. So we want to mute the one of them. So now say we wanted to grade one of these. Basically, if I was to grade this shot on top here, that would change the grading for any time that shot appears within this sequence. And likewise, if I graded the shot beneath it, that would do the same for this sequence as well. and affect any instance that that shot appears in. Obviously here it's doing the duplicate split screen. That basically is because we've still got it in our multi-camera mode here. If we right click, go to display mode, you can see. You can always change that back to composite just whilst you're in here. Just remember that when you go back, you'll have to change it back to multi-camera if you want to start making cuts. So what if we want to add something new to our multi-camera sequence so that it can be edited alongside our footage? At the minute, we're just using the in-camera audio from both of the cameras. We're not using the audio from the microphone that Steve has here. So let's get that audio. We can just drag the file in like we would any other time. And then it is literally just a case of doing what we did when we first synchronized the clips together earlier, and we just highlight all of the clips, right click, and then go to synchronize using the audio again, say OK, and then that'll take a moment to process. Okay, so as you can see, that's finally processed. It's now all synchronized with the audio, basically where I've clapped before. It's got that now all lined up correctly as I want it. We want to use this audio, not the camera audio anymore, so just make sure you obviously mute the channels that you don't want to hear anymore. As you can see, it's knocked these clips across because there is more at the beginning of the audio file than there was for the video files. Bear in mind that this will now basically knock everything else across. You'll see at the beginning we've now just got all this black before anything actually appears. So that's going to have basically knocked all of our cuts out of sync. All of where we cut now, these parts here before have been moved across over here. So just be aware that that will happen. Try to get everything into your multi-camera sequence before you start making cuts. Otherwise you might find that you have some sync issues with where you've made your cuts. If you remember where the beginning of the sequence was initially though, so obviously it would have started the sequence before at the beginning of our camera 2 take here. You can just cut the audio like so, ripple delete, move it back, and then that should bring everything back in sync. So that now those cuts are in the same place as they were before, and the only bit of black at the start is basically because we're on camera 1 at the minute, and camera 1 doesn't start until just after camera 2 had been recorded basically. So now if I want, I can go and take my second file from take 1 from the 5D. As I said, it splits it into multiple files. These literally just stitch together like so. There's no gap between the frames. It's just the way those files work. You just have to stitch them together. So I can put those in. So that's all synced up nicely. You can see we've got a lot of excess here where things have been recorded afterwards, and it's all been put into one audio file. You can literally just cut that off, and that won't affect your sequence here. If I leave it in, so I've undone that and I've left it in, you can see that there's actually more to the clip now. But then if I get rid of it, like I did, it comes up with these these weird lines here, which basically means there's no information here. There's no visual information. There's no audio information. This is just dead space. So then you can just close up your sequence again to get rid of that. Obviously, I'm doing it a bit hastily there. So yeah, obviously you can add effects to all your clips here, and it will only affect it to that individual clip. Obviously, if I was to add an effect here, if I was to resize this, it would affect everything within this part of the sequence. But it's just a quicker way to go through and cut without having to constantly go, see, cut, go frame by frame, all this kind of thing. It's just a much faster way to do it. If I wanted to, obviously you could then, if I had a take 2, I could then go into here, I could create another multi-camera sequence, I could save it, and I could have a separate sequence, bring that in, or you could even just bring the shots that you want, synchronize them within here. It's all within a multi-camera sequence now, so you'll still be able to hop into your main sequence, go into display, and use the buttons here. This is basically what you've enabled. That's the main reason for doing it, is getting this ability here, because that will allow you to speed up your edits a lot. So yeah, have a play with it, get a feel for it. Let us know if I've missed anything in the comments, and let us know what you'd like to take a look at in Adobe next. And I'll see if I can get another video sorted. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.